Okay. We're recording. Our creation is here. And it's here. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to share some screen. First of all, I want to talk about let's see. I think I want to talk about fractures and remodeling of bones. So I did a brief thing on bone growth and bone remodeling, and I've said a little bit in various places about bones, but bones are really, really active tissues. They're going to grow your whole life. They grow and change. They can shrink and grow your whole life. They grow in length only for a little while. Can you see the remodeling of a long bone here? Anyone?
Yeah, see
Okay.
it.
Okay, there's a cartilage plate between the epiphysis and the diaphysis of the bone. And that's where growth and length occurs. So when you're a child, this plate is thick and you grow about a couple millimeters every, or a couple centimeters every year. And but as you get into puberty, your production of sex hormones goes up. And so for girls, this happens a little younger than boys, but they get this burst of estrogen and progesterone. And those hormones promote cell division and growth. And so, so you get a growth spurt during puberty as you get these sex hormones come in. This cartilage grows faster and it's replaced by bone faster. And so this for girls, this might happen in 6th or 7th grade, and often it's done by the time they're freshmen in high school, but they've grown quite a bit in height. They may have grown a foot, may have grown a foot and a half, something like that. And when that happens, when it's done growing in length, is when the bone has replaced all this cartilage. But that doesn't mean your bone is done growing. The bone can thicken. The periosteum has cells in it that allow bone deposition. And so if you have extra calcium, you'll deposit bone. If you need calcium, you'll remove bone. Okay, and this is also important to note in fractures. Let's see if I can switch to the next slide. Do you see the bone fracture slide? Anyone? Yes. Bone fractures?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can see it.
Okay. So bones can have, there's lots of different ways bones can fractures. You can have complete breaks. You can have incomplete breaks. You can have breaks where the bone is almost pulverized, like the comminuted break. You can have impactions where a bone is like jammed into itself, and you can have all these spiral fractures. And bone is really good at repair. And partly that's because bone is a really active tissue. Okay. And bone has lots and lots of blood vessels. So do you see the bone repair slide? Yes. Okay. So because when a bone fractures and it's really loaded with blood vessels, almost always that means blood vessels are damaged and torn and you get bleeding or hemorrhage. Okay. And this hemorrhage will be kind of held in the bone by the periosteum. And so you'll get this mass of blood in there, and that blood will clot. It will form what's called a hematoma. And so this is a clotted mass of blood that forms at the site of the fracture. As long as the fracture kind of remains immobile, this will happen quite quickly. There'll be swelling, it'll be painful, there'll be inflammation, but this is the first step in healing, is the formation of this clot. Okay, and within a couple days that this forms, you will get cells migrating in from the periosteum, and the first cells are chondrocytes, and they'll start replacing the clot fibers with a soft callus or a mass of collagen and and cartilage. And this soft callus is flexible, but it's the beginning of the repair. And blood vessels will start growing in there, and phagocytic cells are going to remove the clot proteins, which are called fibrin. And you will also get, at the same time this happens, you will start getting bone cells migrating in, these osteoblasts. Okay, and so you'll get the formation of a bony callus. And this is osteoblasts that are migrating in. And this will be woven bone. It will look different than the regular bone. It won't look like typical bone tissue, but it's strong, and it'll be an enlarged mass, a big lump around the bone. And this takes a while. From the cartilage, callus forms in a couple days, and then the bone callus will begin forming after that, and that will be completely formed 4 to 6 weeks after the injury. Okay, and so the bone heals actually pretty fast compared to fibrous connective tissue or cartilage. Bone heals amazingly fast. Okay, and the bone will callus, that thick callus that's there after the bone heals 4 to 6 weeks, will eventually be completely remodeled. It will be, if the bone was set nicely and there's no change in the orientation of the two parts of the bone, the excess material will be removed and the original shape will likely be restored. And you will get a lamellar bone back at the original site. But this, again, this remodeling may take quite a while. This may take a year. Okay? And so bone repair is partly because bone is such an active tissue. Okay, so then let me see if I want to talk a little bit about calcium stuff. And so, yeah, okay. Do you see the calcium homeostasis page? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I went over this at the end of the PowerPoint, but it's important. This is a big homeostatic mechanism. Okay. Calcium is really important. Okay. And it's not just important for bones. Calcium is needed for nerves to signal, for one nerve cell to signal another nerve cell. They depend on having a normal concentration of calcium in the blood. Likewise, muscle cells depend on calcium in the blood. Without the correct level of calcium in the blood, muscle cells can't contract, they'll be paralyzed. And this includes heart muscle and muscles of the blood vessels and digestive tract, smooth muscle. So calcium homeostasis is really about maintaining calcium levels in the blood so that nerves and muscles can function. Without nerves and muscles, you're dead quickly. so you know, if your bones go bad, that's a problem. You'll be limp and you won't be able to do anything, and you may get fractures that you wouldn't normally get, but you'll at least be alive. If calcium levels drop too low, you're going to die. So calcium homeostasis is about maintaining calcium levels in the blood. And the control centers for this are really glands. Two glands, the parathyroid gland and the thyroid gland. And the two hormones released are parathyroid hormone, PTH, and calcitonin. Parathyroid hormone is released by the parathyroid gland. And what it does, it's released whenever calcium levels in the blood are too low, and it's going to cause osteoclasts in bone to release stored calcium into the blood to raise calcium levels right away. It'll also start some two longer-term processes. One is that it'll affect the intestines to absorb calcium, be better at absorbing calcium from food as long as there's vitamin D present. And then it'll prevent calcium loss by the kidney. And so calcium is reabsorbed from the urine. Okay. So parathyroid hormone is going to boost calcium levels in the blood by causing the release of calcium from bone, and then it's saving calcium and getting calcium from food. Okay, if we have excess calcium in the blood, then that's going to cause the thyroid gland to release calcitonin. And calcitonin will cause cells in the bone, osteoblasts, to deposit more bone, and it'll reduce bone loss. Okay. It also, because calcitonin inhibits parathyroid hormone, it's also going to cause calcium to be lost from the urine and less calcium to be reabsorbed. And so you have these three major mechanisms. The glands, the thyroid and parathyroid, they're both working on the bone, the intestine, and the kidney. Okay. And in one case, they'll boost calcium levels in the blood. Other case, they'll drop it. But notice here that the fast change, the way the body can quickly get calcium levels correctly, is by altering how much is stored or released. And so the bones are the quick way of getting calcium. Okay. And so this is really important, because if calcium levels are low, the first thing that's going to happen is calcium is going to come out of your bones. And so this is what leads to osteoporosis. And there are some predisposing factors that make some people more at risk. Okay, whoops, did I go up? Let me go here. When we get older, levels of growth hormone and other hormones that promote cell growth, these hormones tend to drop. Okay, and when you age, those hormones that are dropping are making the bone cells that deposit bone less active. So it gets harder to store bone. And so it's easier for bone matrix to be lost as you get old. And for women, this is really important, because one of those hormones that decreases with aging are the sex hormones. And women have an abrupt, dramatic decrease in estrogen and progesterone with menopause. Okay, and so for women, they have this big change that occurs that makes it harder for them to store calcium when they're past menopause. And so they're more likely to have low bone mass than men, because they've got this dramatic change that happens at menopause. And where men has a more gradual decline in hormones, for women it's more dramatic. And because men have larger bones, because we're larger to begin with, and women are smaller to begin with, this makes it a really potentially a bigger problem for women. And so these effects of aging on the skeletal system are potentially a bigger problem for women. And so this is of course what leads to osteoporosis. This affects large numbers of people, mostly elderly, more likely women than men. And the biggest risk factors are age and gender, and you can't modify those. You can modify other factors that affect it. And probably the biggest one is diet. If your diet has lots of calcium in it, you're less likely to run into these problems. Okay. Also, if you build high bone mass through maintaining a healthy weight, having lots of exercise, avoiding two things, smoking and alcohol consumption, that tend to make calcium less available. If you do those things, you can have high bone mass, and then you won't run into this problem. This is really about the activity of cells that are modifying bone. Okay, and so osteoporotic bones, you first lose the trabeculae, and then the bone becomes much less strong, because the supporting network underneath is eroded, and then fractures can occur. And so, like, this is a fracture in the strongest part of the femur, which you see on the left there. Okay, so that was long. Does anybody have any questions on osteoporosis? Has anybody heard any of this before?
So is that has to do with genetically, like with that osteoporosis?
Yes, there's some genetics involved, but genetics is not the biggest thing. I mean, the people most susceptible are women. White women and Asian women are more susceptible than African American or Native American women. but there's these risk factors that we can modify. And so your diet makes a difference. That's a big difference. Your patterns of exercise make a big difference. The more you exercise, the more your muscles pull on your bone, and that stimulates the cells that deposit bone. Okay. And so if you engage in lots of physical activity, you're going to build bone mass. Okay. You'll just be better at building bone. If you're inactive, if you have a desk job like me on the computer, I'm 8 hours a day, I'm just on the computer. That tends to make you inactive. That causes calcium loss. The bad news is more and more of us have desk jobs. Healthcare now is migrated to desk jobs. You do a lot of charting and you do a lot of reading of charts and you do a lot of stuff like that that makes you inactive. When you're a patient care technician or a nursing assistant, then it's lifting. It's lifting patients, moving patients, helping patients do things. But the farther you go into things like critical care in skilled nursing units, things like that, it's more and more of diagnosis, reading, and adjusting and things like that. So it's less and less activity. And so as people have less active jobs, this becomes more likely.
So if you happen to take any calcium vitamins, is there such thing as taking a lot or taking too much?
Yes, you can take too much. Most of the supplements you want a modest amount. You can excrete calcium. Okay. So if you take just a little bit too much, that's not a big deal because you can get rid of it in your urine, but it might give you kidney stones. But if you take, if you're supposed to take one pill and you take 5, you can actually deposit calcium in places you don't want calcium, and that can cause problems. You're probably never going to eat too much calcium, but it's pills. If you take too many pills, you can do it. But a calcium supplement is often recommended. If you see your doctor and he does a test, they can test for your bone density, and he suggests, you have a small frame, you have low bone density, and you have a job where you're mostly working on the computer. Maybe it would be good to take a calcium supplement. Take what's recommended. Don't take extra. Okay, it's more is not better always. It's take what's recommended. This is very good questions. It's very, very important things to know. And of course, if you're young, you're building bone mass. When you're young, when you're in your teens and 20s and 30s, it's easier for you to deposit bone mass than it is for someone like me. I'm in my 50s. It's harder for me to deposit bone mass. My hormone levels are lower. I have less growth hormone. My sex hormones are declining gradually, but they're still declining. And so in that case, I don't, I'm physically active outside of work. And I've been physically active for a long time. So I'm thinking I probably got pretty good bone mass. I'm definitely not underweight, but, and this is one case where being underweight is actually kind of bad for you. Because if you're 20 or 30 pounds overweight, carrying that weight around every day is like exercise. And so it causes you to deposit extra bone. So that whenever I'm overeating, I say, well, I'm preventing osteoporosis. So, okay. So it's, healthy doesn't mean skinny, or it doesn't mean plump. It means active and able to do stuff, and having good muscle mass. And so you can be healthy at a variety of weights, and being too skinny in some cases can be very bad. And people that have anorexia when they're young are likely to have osteoporosis when they're old because they're not building good bone mass. So don't do that. Okay. All right. I had another thing I was going to talk about. Oh, you know what? Before I go too long, I want to talk about exams. So, the first exam is done, um, and you should be able to see your score on there. And there were some issues on certain essay questions that some people ran out of time, or they were trying to cut and paste. It won't let you cut and paste. I should have said that. You have to type it out. You can work it in advance, but you have to type it out while it's there. And so don't plan on cutting and pasting. That won't work. They're trying to help you not plagiarize. Okay. I do write short comments on the exams, on the essay questions. And so often I will write several comments like check details or add more details. And that means you're being too general, because often the questions you can answer them like an example of homeostasis is body temperature. Okay. I want more detail than that. Okay. If body temperature rises, then we perspire. Evaporation cools the skin. The blood flow in the skin carries that blood is cooled, and that cools the entire body. Some of that detail. I'm also not interested in having you copy sentences out of the textbook. Okay, you have the textbook there, and I wasn't very hard on it this time, but I can recognize those things easily because I read the same phrases over and over. If you think I'm going to copy out of this textbook and he's not going to notice, there are other people doing the same thing. And so even if I'm not really on top of it, I start realizing, hey, this sounds a lot like the last one. And so don't do that. Write it in your own words. I know what students say, and I know what students don't say. And so sometimes I see certain words and I think, okay, that's a word that no student ever uses. Excessive. Students don't use that. They say too much. And so that clues me off. Write it in your own words. I want to know that you're doing it. I want to know that you understand it. If you're just copying it from somewhere, then I know you don't. And so I'm okay if you follow up a few details. That's okay. Don't worry about that. Get the overall thing right. Put in enough details so that I know. I will get harder and harder on people who are copying out of the textbook, okay, on essays. I think you have to write. In healthcare, it's written communication is more and more important, okay, that you're not going to be the only one taking care of a patient. And patients move, so they start here and they go somewhere else. So writing things down is really important. And health records are transferable now. So it's really important that you be able to write things down clearly and fully and in a description. And so this writing is important. I went into science because I couldn't do English, but now I realize, oh my God, you do have to write. I'm writing all the time, and it's even for in healthcare, nursing. You're handing off patients from one shift to the next. And so that takes a lot of coordination and written coordination. Okay, so look over your exams, look over the comments. Don't be afraid to write. Practice writing. It's important. Okay, and let me share another screen. Lab is really busy, and so there's a lot in lab that I go over quickly, but I want to reemphasize it sometimes in these meetings. And one is this week we're starting the skeletal system. And we have to learn the names of the bones and the names of important landmarks on the bones. Again, this is important because we're going to communicate with other health professionals, and we have to be really exact. We can't say, oh, it's a leg bone. We say femur. And so we use these specific Latin names of bones and regions of bones. Okay, and the good news is when it comes to learning the names of the muscles and the blood vessels, that often it's the same name. Okay, that we use the same terms when we name anything. These are the Latin-based terms, and so we find out that. Um, so you're going to learn the names of the bones, but we're also going to learn some names of landmarks. And the landmarks are pretty typical. We have terms for different types of regions of bones, like the body of the bone or the head. We talk about things like condyles, which are smooth surfaces for joints, facets, similar things. We also are naming ridges. Prominent ridges are often sites of muscle attachment. So we'll have crests and spines and things like that. And smaller attachments are just projections. They'll be like processes, tubercles, tuberosities, trochanters. And then there's holes of bones where blood vessels or nerves go in. These are usually called foramen, but sometimes they get the term canal or meatus or fissure. And so these terms show up over and over again. I'll give you a handout on these on Friday in lab, but it's stuff that we've got to get used to. And so I'm going to go over this over and over again. This is all memorization. That's practice and repetition. Okay, I know it because I have to do it all the time. You have to get yourself to practice it. And so this is going to mean writing it out, flashcards. Before COVID, I would really encourage students to get together and quiz one another. You can still do that. You can get together virtually, but that's one of the best ways to do it, is to practice saying it with a partner. It's a really good way. So that's how memorization works. It's practice, repetition, doing it in different ways. This will help you if you can do it, because the next stuff will be a lot like this. Okay, so it's fair warning is what I'm giving you. This is a big memory task. So I apologize in advance, but it's what we have to do. Okay. All right, I think I'm done. If anyone has any questions, though, I'll answer questions. Maybe.
Are you saying that before we do the lab test, we have the chance to review ourselves then and give us the handout and what needed to be done?
I'll give you a handout on Friday or for the lab. So that'll be on the skeletal system. So it'll be a front and back handout that'll have it'll have all the bones that you have to know and the important landmarks. Your lab manual has more detail. Okay, and anything in your lab manual is fair game, but this is the most important stuff. You know, if you look at your lab manual, you know, the skeletal system is really detailed. And we have a bunch of different exercises. This is page 91, exercise 7 starts the skeletal system. And on this first page, it shows the scapula. It starts with the scapula, and it's going to list in bold landmarks of the scapula. Let me read the landmarks it lists, and this is not all because it starts on the next page. These are the landmarks: superior border, medial border, vertebral border, lateral border, scapular notch, subscapular fossa, scapular fine, supraspinous fossa, infraspinous fossa, acromion process, coracoid process, inferior angle, superior angle, glenoid cavity, supraglenoid tubercle, infraglenoid tubercle. So one bone, it lists all those parts. That's impossible to do at once. And nobody can memorize that in one sitting.
So we don't have to worry about cells and parts of the cells. It's just basically.
We do, but the big task is, and we've kind of done some of that with the tissues, but the big task is the name of the bones and the landmarks. And we're starting that on Friday. And so it's a big task. And so, you know, this is part of what has to be done in this course, is to learn all these names for all these body parts. You know, a lot of these things you have kind of a name for. You know, it's my shoulder blade. You know, this bone here. Okay, now we're going to know that's the scapula, and it has these borders, and it connects to this other bone at this glenoid fossa. That's a really important part. And then it has an acromion process that connects with our collarbone. So we're gonna try and learn the most important parts first. Bless you. And when we learn those most important parts first, some of you next year will have to learn more parts. You know, you'll have to go into more detail, but to at least get the names of the individual bones and the most important landmarks. That's what we have to do. Okay, and it's a lot.
Okay, so is that lab 7 or is this lab 6?
This I'm not sure. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. This is the September 25th lab for us, and the September or October 2nd lab. So it's these next 2 weeks we're working on the skeletal system. Okay, and then there's the lab exam, so it's coming up.
Okay, so for lab 5, it says it's worth 100 points.
Lab 5. Where does it say that?
On my Moodle.
Oh, that would be a mistake. If it says 100, it's supposed to be 10. Fix it, don't worry.
Okay, because I was concerned. I was like, what
No,
do I have to do to worth 100 points?
No, you have, when something odd is like that, Lucretia, you have to let me know because I make all sorts of mistakes. I have to fix them. Okay, that's exercise 5.
That's lab 5. Yep.
Okay. All right, I'll look at it. Okay. All right, we're over 30 minutes, so it's gonna shut off on us here. All right, so I will see you. There's a lab quiz. There's a quiz for the chapter open. I'm working on the forum. There'll be a forum that'll show up today. So.
Okay, one more question. Was our exam for the lab, would that be in person or would that be on the computer?
That will be in person.
Okay.
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 All right. Okay, so let's see. I'll see you on Friday. We'll email me if you have another question. That Lucretia, that would be a good thing to email me on if something looks like it's too many points. Email me on something like that, and I will fix it sooner. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.